into the chat as a way of introduction. If you're here, you are part of the Housing Cooperative Task Force, and this is meeting number 2. Rachel, are we doing a screen share?
We can do a screen share.
So as we're pulling up our presentation, today's agenda is going to look at the demand for expanded affordable housing options. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to cover what we talked about last time and flesh out a timeline. We'll launch into an overview on the current state of co-ops and demand, and talk about how to harness interest amongst households. Today's aim or goal is really to share views and experience related to existing and new demand for stable, affordable co-op housing supply. And we look to you all as experts in policy and practice. All right, next slide, please. Overall, we wanted to just take a step back and review what the purpose of our task force is. And there's really 4 main goals that our task force has been charged with. 1, to determine housing cooperative needs, typologies, and demands. 2, to look at how we can expand the number of housing cooperatives as one tool to create permanently affordable shared ownership. 3, to identify the types of investments needed to preserve existing cooperatives. And 4, to improve housing stability and reduce the racial wealth gap. So that's what our task force is charged with. We'll make sure to revisit these each meeting, just to ground ourselves in our purpose and aim. Next slide, please. Our first meeting was on December 18th, and these were some of the key highlights and key points that we wanted to pull up from that meeting. We talked about Senator Mike Simmons, Mike Simmons gave an overview of why this work is important and what our charge is. We talked about cooperative housing that requires access to resources, dedicated sources, money and lending avenues, as well as share loans. We talked about existing and potential new sources and resource partners. We discussed some of the key players in the field today: Elevate, CCLBA, TRP, NHS, CIC, all of whom have been quite active with the Center for Shared Ownership, and obviously we know there are many more organizations that have participated in the creation of a cooperative housing ecosystem. We talked about public education, the need to inform community, to inform the real estate industry, and to inform policy leaders and elected and appointed officials of the importance of co-ops. And we talked about leadership that moves policies that reinforce co-op viability and sustainability, turn it really more into one of the mainstream go-to options for affordability for new residents. We discussed some of the different ways to insert subsidy into cooperative projects or preservation of existing cooperative buildings. And we talked about the systems that need to be built that can channel real estate toward the co-op option. And finally, we spent some time with big thinking to talk about how to move federal leadership, city and state interests, and legislative agendas to support the sustainability of our cooperative ecosystem, our affordable cooperative ecosystem. Next slide, please. And a roadmap. So today we're talking about harnessing demand for expanded housing options. At our next meeting, which we're proposing to occur on April 12th, we'll dive deep into financing models for housing cooperatives. The 4th task force meeting, we'll visit the topic of sustaining existing and future housing cooperatives. What does it take to create sustainability at a building level and a system level? Then we move into drafting recommendations, a public comment period, and a final document release. So that's really our roadmap for where we're going. And with that, I would love to turn over to my esteemed colleague, Rachel Johnson from CRN.
Thanks, David. I'm not seeing everybody. Someone give me a shout out when Senator Simmons pops on, because we'd like him to say hello. Um, so I'm I'm going to try and be brief. And it's hard for me to be brief because I'm so excited about what we can do to expand housing supply. Um, the cooperatives federally were started in by the Roosevelt administration, though there were cooperatives before that. We have a video on YouTube of Dr. Jessica Gordon Embard talking about the history of collective action and, in particular, African American cooperatives around the country. And that's really an awesome thing to watch. But the Roosevelt administration needed a solution to a massive shortage of housing and put this federal guarantee into place. And so um, we've had cooperatives in Chicago since then, since the late 30s, early 40s. Um, there are 18,000 households in Chicago that identify as living in cooperatives, and that's through the American Housing Survey. Um, in Chicago, there are over 200, and in greater outside of Chicago in Cook County, there's almost 100 cooperatives. Now I could like zoom in on this map a little bit and show, addresses and pins. Um, lots of these were World War II veteran housing. That's how they were constructed. They're older buildings. We really don't like to give out, kind of addresses and of older buildings. Anything that would fuel speculation is something we try and avoid. So we're not gonna, share the live version of these maps. The next slide, please. I'll just, I guess, say in summary about what it looks like. You drive by co-ops every day. They're former rental buildings, they're high rises, 20 flats, 50 flats. Their conversion from rental apartments, conversion from LIHTC, and townhomes, um, all over, all over the city and county. Next slide. Let me see here. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, thank you. Okay. So you can see Arlington Heights down to Ford Heights. One of the first single family and townhome co-ops in the country was in Park Forest, which is still, alive and well. You can drive and see those, or we could talk about giving a tour if that's interesting to people. Okay. Next slide. I think we have someone in the waiting room here. Okay. So just to talk a little bit about the supply shortage, we've just pulled out some data points. The Rehab Network has published affordable housing fact books in 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2015. And we have a lot of data in-house that's up to date as well. We stopped making paper and killing trees. This chart here just released new data from the Joint Center at Harvard. This is a chart about Illinois, and you can see over the last 10 years that we have a shortage in every income category listed in this chart. And it's consistent with DePaul's Institute of Housing Studies and what their finding is in Cook County, which is a shortage of 160,000 units. Senator Simmons, I think you're here with us. True? I'm wondering. Yeah, great.
I'm here.
Do you want to just let me stop here and give you the floor and say a few words.
Well, first of all, good morning. And that was of such a good presentation. I don't even like to have to interrupt it, but I told Heather I wanted to join you for the beginning of this meeting. I've got to go into caucus in about 20 minutes, but I'm gonna stay with you at least for 15 minutes. Just first of all, to reaffirm the work that you're doing. Just so you know, we talk about this cooperative housing effort all the time. It comes up in conversations with my colleagues at different levels of government. Word is getting around that this group is working on this effort. So I just wanted you to know that it's appreciated by many people in the community all across the state. Um, and really eagerly anticipating final write-up that comes out of this group. Excited that we have that revenue source coming starting in FY25 to start to get this work up off the ground. So that's all I wanted to say. Heather, is there anything else that I wanted to mention this morning? I have a lot going on right now, so I don't always remember every single point that I need to say.
That's all right. No, I didn't have anything else to add. But don't know if you were on for the first couple of minutes, but David Feinberg from Chicago Community Fund shared kind of like a high level overview of what the timeline looks like for the next 4 meetings, I believe. David, would you mind just sharing that one more time? So what the focus of like the third, fourth, and fifth meetings looks like, and then the sixth would culminate in that final draft of the report.
That would be great.
Absolutely. Good morning, Senator Simmons.
Good morning.
So today we're talking about demand for expanded housing options. Our next task force, we're going to dive deep into financial models that make housing cooperatives viable. I'm looking at different ways subsidy can be inserted, incentives can be inserted into those models. Task force for meeting number 4, we're going to talk about the sustainability of housing cooperatives, both at an ecosystem and kind of co-op by co-op level. So that's April 12th and April 25th for those next 2 dates. Then we'll move into drafting recommendations, what we anticipate as a public comment period and a final document release.
That sounds fantastic. And I can't wait to see the final outcome of this group. I mean, even as I know everybody on this group, but even as I'm looking around at some of the faces, I'm just like, this is like a movement, which is great. I'm truly humbled to see it all come together. So I'll stop there. Elected officials tend to talk a lot. I don't want to talk more than I need to in this meeting, but I will hang out and kind of listen along to some of the presentation. I enjoyed just a little bit I heard about the study, Institute of Housing Studies. The other thing too is that recently in a number of my public comments and even press interviews around the broader issue of housing insecurity, and the broader issue of economic insecurity, I found myself talking in more detail around the data around the housing shortage, both for Chicago and the state. So this type of data is, not for academic shelves. I mean, there's, more progressive elected officials that are mainstreaming this stuff so that people feel the urgency. So thank you.
The timing definitely feels right, doesn't it? Okay, maybe back to that Joint Center in Harvard slide, please. Okay. Yeah, this may not be new to lots of you, but it's just one more piece of evidence that what we experience every day, shows up in high level data, and that is just unarguable dwindling supply of units. The next slide is a look at the latest census data by community area. And this is actually ACS data 2021. On the next slide. I'm going to move that forward.
Yeah, we didn't see that last slide, Rachel.
Oh,
We're still on,
yeah, we're still in the
But-
joint.
yeah.
Can we go to the next slide? Oh, great. Okay. So this is recent data that we've put together in-house that helps us always focus at the Rehab Network, our advocacy on what people, what the income of households are in different neighborhoods. And I can share this sheet in the chat for all the community areas as well as cost burden. You'll see that these incomes are a lot lower than what the AMI chart is that I think gets used in the industry by all kinds of developers to qualify their work and their projects. But, you know, one thing as a coalition of community-based developers, we're really focused on very specifically what need is in a geography. And, you know, connecting this to co-ops, the research shows, and the experience of co-ops around the country are that these monthly housing costs, they're called carrying charges, are lower than the cost of buying a single family home. They're lower than rental market in Chicago. They're lower than rental market monthly charges. So this data is kind of, you know, building our feeling that we can add stable housing to the stock in Chicago and take the pressure off of the rental market.
I'm sorry, can you explain the chart a little more?
Sure. So this shows median household income in each community area.
Yep, got that.
And then the census breaks down further into these 4 categories. How many households are under 25,000?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in Albany Park, there's 2,400 households that earn under 25,000 a year.
Got it.
And moving to the right, there's 8,200 households that make over 75. So Dana, if you go to the next slide, please. Thanks. I mean, I know this is familiar to everybody, but it's such a different picture than using this AMI chart, which is really for a 9-county area. And I think you'll, you know, you'll see for a family of 4 right now, 100% of AMI is $110,000.
Versus Albany Park, just to underscore, what's Albany Park's? 110 versus Albany Park. We'll go back.
57,000. 57,000.
And the other thing you see too in this Albany Park line, just to help people understand it, the growth of the 75,000 or more just shows the pressure of the growth in higher income households moving into and creating Albany Park, being part of the fabric of Albany Park. And then you have the over 6,000 remaining under the average of 57. And what we're trying to always keep in mind that Rachel was underscoring is being mindful of who's getting served.
Who's getting served, and also, you know, really focusing on co-ops as a solution that's about creating housing stability. We hear lots of reasons that people choose co-ops. Retiring people make those decisions, or families or individuals. And it really isn't about equity. It is about a stable monthly housing payment that allows the household then to save, have a savings account, to put money into education, to make other choices for their family. So that's why we don't say shared equity. We're trying to kind of focus on, the benefit of the stable monthly payment.
Do we know, do you know, I don't know. So when we compare what people, like, is there like an average sort of monthly payment for people who live in co-ops? Like, what do they typically pay versus what they would pay for rental in the same community?
Like as a percentage, that would be helpful if we knew that.
Let
I
me
mean, I was just
have
interested
a,
in sort of the aggregate, not that, just, I mean, I realize that there are other reasons why people even want to live in a co-op, but I'm just curious about, I don't know, I'm stuck on how we get these things financed if we're gonna do new ones. Like, I have no idea how that's gonna happen.
yep.
So I'm interested in, like, assuming you can get it done, like, how does paying for a co-op compare with paying for a, similar rental property with sort of, normal amenities in a given neighborhood?
So every co-op that was built in a different year would have a different story about what that monthly carrying charge is, because of the financing. Just like with a LIHTC building that you're doing now is compared to what might have happened 10 years ago, right? The
Yep.
fact, and what's true about a shared ownership building like a co-op is that it is developed at a not at a highest and best use model, right? It's not like a condo development where a developer is hoping to, sell 50 units and then go back to, you know, Paris or whatever. I know, Peter, do you want to jump in with some
Well,
ways
I was
to
just,
think about this question?
I think part of what you're getting at, Rachel, is, they when they're built, there is a particular affordability, and that depends on the subsidies. But I think the other thing with a co-op, by maintaining long-term, hopefully permanent affordability, that value increase, the rent equivalent, the carrying charges stay relatively similar, which becomes a better and better deal over time. That, if they're raising it by inflation, well, rent is raising, but the inflation of the costs plus the inflation on the profit the rental landlord is making. And so the co-op, by cutting that second piece out, in the short run, it may not be a huge savings, but after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it can be dramatic. I know in New York, the 30, roughly 30-year-old co-ops are, in the neighborhood of, are under $700 a month carrying charges compared to the, $3,500, $4,000 rent next door. And that's, that's, under $700 is a better deal now than it probably was even 30 years ago,
Right.
even though the number is much bigger.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was curious. Like, obviously we track median rent pretty well, but do we know what sort of median co-op costs are?
Yeah, or even, I agree with you 100%, Bill, or even if you have just some actuals, I don't have that information, but if anyone with some kind of database has some actuals of what the share price was and what the monthly is, if we could just get some of that data, then we could do a comparison to rents in the community. And at least, because every time I raise this topic, that's the first, almost the first question I get is how this aligns with, in the stack of rent, own, and co-op. And so we need, I think we really we would benefit tremendously from having some kind of generalization, maybe, of it's 30% or 55% of a typical rent in the neighborhood, something that we could quantify this.
Sure, and we do have data. We have a survey that CCLF conducted that we use as a baseline that shows share price, monthly housing cost, etc.
We have a couple of people's hands up in the chat.
Yeah, Joy?
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I think that it just depends on there are lots of income targeting for co-ops. And so there's not, I think, a unique model that has been followed. And so some co-ops are not affordable at all. They're market rate, and which I don't think we have as many of in Chicago, but certainly there are in New York. And but I think, because in Chicago it has not been, there are plenty of co-ops, but it hasn't been treated that way. And so I think there are fewer models of what people have set their share prices at. I've seen really low share prices. I've seen higher share prices as a philosophical issue about who you're working with and what they believe. I've also seen some of our lenders say that they won't allow a share price, which is sort of a profound educational issue. So I really think that I think it's a worthwhile look nonetheless, but I think with an appreciation that there are lots of different experiences in co-op development.
And I've learned to think about this as a hybrid, right? It's not a perfect comparison to a LIHTC unit, and it isn't a perfect comparison to a single family home. But co-op leaseholders, shareholders, they do get you can deduct a portion of your property taxes. So you do get that benefit. This in a city where we have hundreds of aging rental buildings, many at risk, in court, in receivership, there's a possibility to think about how to make those into co-ops. And yeah, I'll just stop there. I'm not doing a good job of seeing people's hands. Is anyone else?
Ty and David.
Okay, David. Yeah.
I think Itai was first.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think this is a very worthwhile discussion. We have to look at both the economic benefits of co-ops as well as potential social benefits. It's not just creating housing for people, it is also creating community. There is a shared governance system, and in terms of economic benefits, the shared governance system ensures that what is paid by the members is what is needed to run and maintain the property. There is no leakage. in terms of profits going to somebody else. It is the co-ops who make this decision. So I think we really need to highlight the social aspects of it. It's creating community. It's creating a safety net for people to live together. And this really is appealing, could be appealing to different communities, especially immigrant communities, getting an opportunity to reside in the same circles, be a social support to each other. We need to highlight that as well, beyond the economic benefits and preventing leakages that are going elsewhere. I think in terms of expanding the market or the interest for this model, working with community organizations is vital. Providing information, training, workshops, and giving people the opportunity to self-select their own groups. And I think this, at least in the initial stages, could work very well for small buildings like 12-unit buildings, 6-unit buildings, 24-unit buildings, where people come together and obviously somebody needs to do the legwork to organize people to come together. And I think the first step is really to demonstrate what the economic benefits are, what the social benefits are, and what the long-term benefits are to people. That there are benefits, I'm sure there are. It really creates an opportunity to create community, and that is significantly valued by especially low-income communities, seniors, immigrant communities, and we should tap into this market. I think there is a great demand so long as we can market it well, and also obviously make sure that there are incentives in place, mechanisms that make it easier for people to come together and do this kind of ownership. So I think the work has to be, on the one hand, expanding the market. I think the market is there as long as we can tap into it. And two, making sure that there are resources to enable this market to be able to become co-owners of property. And I think there also needs to be a balance between affordability and return. There needs to be a decent incentive for people to invest. There is a return, but that return has to be moderated, mitigated by the amount of subsidy that's put into the project, so that there is affordability that goes on into the future. But there needs to be some kind of balance when we talk about limited equity co-ops. This is for starters. I think I just want to highlight the social benefits have to be made part of this discussion. Thanks.
David? Thank you, Itai. Thank you.
Thanks, Itai. I just wanted to really quickly respond to Itai, Joy, and Cami and Bill's comments. I posted a link to a CCLF study of the co-op portfolio that CCLF holds. It's from a few years back, but a few interesting data points. Based on the sample set we looked at, housing in the co-ops was between as low as 20% of monthly income, maybe as high as 35 to 40% in a few co-ops, but most of them were below that 30% threshold that I think a lot of us are trying to aspire to. And then to Itai's point, we actually looked at resident stabilization and residency tenure within the co-ops, and there were, on average, it was more than 8 years amongst all the residents that were there, suggesting that there's quite a high level of stability in the community that cooperative residents bring, and pretty low turnover. So I just wanted to point that out. That link is in the chat.
Thank you, David. Calvin, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this task force call. I just want to level set with everyone on the call just to make sure that we're all aware of new public sector resources that are being brought to bear right now. It's been a long time since Chicagoland has had these kinds of resources, but I just want to make it clear that for the purposes of the task force and the kinds of things that we're going to ideate about today, we are no longer starting from scratch. I think everyone now knows that the city of Chicago last year launched the Shared Ownership Housing Preservation Fund, which is a $15 million initiative which will provide grants and loans to co-ops and condos in the South Shore community area specifically, 2023, 2024, and 2025. We're very excited about this. We're in partnership with the Chicago Rehab Network and the Center for Shared Ownership, the program that the two corporations operate together. Got a full pipeline already for year one and a very robust pipeline for year two, and we're going to have year threes in short order. We also found out this month that we are going to be the administrator for the Shared Equity Investment Program. The initial dollar amount for this program isn't that big. It's $2 million, but that will be grants for cooperatives, housing cooperatives, and land trusts. And we're anticipating that the demand for this program will be quite high. And then, as you know, and I hope that Senator Simmons is still on the call, and thank you for being with us, Senator, the Illinois Trust Fund is going to be able to provide $5 million in support to cooperatives going forward. And thank you, Cami, for being on the call. And hopefully we'll have those funds in place in 2025. The Chicago Rehab Network and Chicago Community Loan Fund, working along with our Center for Shared Ownership, we are also trying to identify another philanthropic foundation that may put some additional resources in the market for cooperative housing development. So the good news is that it's a new day, it's a new era, and we can build on the resources that we have just got in place and the additional resources that we're going to draw to this marketplace.
Thank you, Calvin. That's good points. It's great to feel that momentum in this situation. Jeff Leslie from the Mandel Legal Clinic, University of Chicago. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. I really appreciated Itai's comments about co-ops and the kind of intentional community aspects of co-ops. I think we should also think about scalability and the kind of smaller co-ops where people are sort of self-organizing to live together in a cooperative fashion is one path. I think we should also look at the more developer-led paths to co-op creation. I think this is probably, the early kind of HUD financed co-ops, more that model. There are some LIHTC conversions, developer-led in some ways, and whether there could be room for a model that's more of a homeownership model where the end financing, to Bill Eager's point, come from the homeowners themselves through share loans. If you think about how a condo developer works, they're not organizing intentional communities, they're selling units, and the community will form of some kind within that community association, but it's all predicated on the homeowners coming in with their own financing to take out that developer's construction loan. So if we have a robust share loan market in Chicago for home buyers, it can make those developer-led efforts, which I think should be part of the strategy, not all of it, would be really helpful.
Good point. Thanks, Jeff.
A really nice way to lay out three paths. I like that.
This is Cami. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. So I'm sorry about that if I'm cutting someone off.
You got the mic. You're good to go, Cami. Thank you. Cami's from Ida.
Yeah, sorry. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am interested in the share loan topic, and so as I'm exploring what that would look like, I really am struggling to find even a lender in Illinois that will offer a share loan to someone. So if anyone has the name of a banker who will do that, please shoot it to me, because I literally cannot find a single person. But more importantly, it would
Cami,
take.
if I could just give you some quick information. So we do know that the National Co-op Bank is an active share loan provider in Chicago, but they approve associations at the cooperative board governance level, and they're making sure that they underwrite the entire association first before they're making that share loan available. And then we've been working with Self-Help Credit Union, which is, has bought Seaway National Bank and Second Federal here in Chicago. And they do make share loans, but they're based on underwriting of the individual, and they're capped at $50,000 per loan. And we've been scrounging the country to see who would either come to Chicago or who we could get to activate their programs in Chicago. And we just haven't found anybody else, but that's one of the things that we hope will come out of the activities of this task force.
Yes, and thank you, Calvin. And I'm actually, and I know TRP, I think, is developing a program for share loan lending. I just saw Kristen come up, but I'll let her talk. I'm interested in if this community, if the folks on this call actually believe that if we build it, they will come. Like, that's in terms of, is there really a market for share loan lending in Illinois if we were to magically tomorrow be able to hang a shingle and say, hey, share loans are available? Or is it something that we're going to have to really cultivate and grow, and it's kind of like we have to build it, they'll come, and then there'll be some traction? I'm interested to hear people's thoughts in the chat or on the call. Thanks.
I just wanted to add that we have, Cami, I've spoken to two, like, I guess not necessarily traditional lenders or like ones we might know of, but I have spoken to two lenders who have been doing share loans for a while in Chicago. One of who told me, though, it's only market rate co-ops. So I think one of the things, and even some of the lenders that I've spoken to who do share loans in other markets, who are lenders that we know, like, for example, like Citibank, Chase, like they do share loans in other markets. And while they may do some every once in a while in Chicago, I haven't met anyone who is doing limited equity or like affordable share loans. So that's kind of the track that we're working on. If for anyone who doesn't know, TRP and PICO were recently awarded a community project funding grant through the 4th Congressional District and Congressman Garcia. So we're really excited about that, and we're using that. PICO is going to be using that for acquisition and development of co-op units, and we're using it for loan capital for share loans. And so have been one of the challenges in developing the product is trying to, learn from others and get the template, and just so we're not starting from scratch. So it's been a lot of like pulling pieces together, but we're pretty close to being able to launch something in terms of having our product finalized. Anyways, and I'm interested in your question too, Cami. I think I've heard people say both. I don't think it's going to be like this, we have a product and there's like tons of demand. I see it more as a building, and this is what we're doing here, right? Like, this is a movement where we're building this. I don't think it'll be a quick something that we're going to see really fast, but I think over time, like, there's something here.
And Kristen and Kimmy, I do want to acknowledge you. Sorry, I didn't say you in that first list of people who are active in the market, because I know that TRP is working to bring your loan products online. And thank you for staying focused on that, because I know that the market needs it. But and Cammie, to answer your question, so we do know, as Kristen has said, that PICO is up and running and expanding, which is terrific. We also know that there's another cooperative community information, Lava Ita. The artist Design for the Future group is working really hard to get themselves organized. We know that there's the Grove Place cooperative that's trying to get off the ground in Bronzeville, and Bill Eager's on the call, and they've been working with POA for their development for quite some time, and we hope that's going to be a great development. And as you know, there's lots of people, as Jeff pointed out, who are self-organizing and creating organic demand for co-ops as well. So there is a market, but we're also going to have to educate the community on why cooperatives are an advantageous strategy to home ownership.
So
a little bit of a
I have,
pull.
okay, can we, Brell has his hand up and then Linda? Sorry, Kevin. Hey,
Yeah, that's
Brell.
perfect. Same thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I also want to just say yeah, it's not going to be like we have share loans, like a share loan provider, and then I wouldn't even say like during that year would we expect really significant use of that product. I'm going to say this from the developer standpoint here. When we're setting up, our projects on behalf of cooperative communities, that takes that there's usually about a year of planning, working with that group, coming up with a capital strategy, setting that all up. And we've been doing that in the absence of share loans being available. And so most of our deals that we have that are in progress are in that, there's going to be that year lag where if the product becomes a thing that we can put into our deals, then yeah, great, we'll start doing that. But there's still going to be that development lag. So I think that it is important for share loan providers to understand that there is that inherent lag between the product being available and it being able to be used in the market. We don't have deals that are just set up and already planned for this to be a part of the deal. Check.
Thank you. Linda?
Yeah, I think the thing that I wanted to add about the share loans, I think there is demand. The conversation right now is really talking about new co-ops. There's a tremendous demand among existing cooperatives for share loans.
Yep.
And I want to be clear that even if I heard a comment saying that NCB only provides for market rate. Let's be clear that a lot of market rate co-ops are very affordable. I live in one. I've lived in one for 37 years. It is affordable. And so one of the biggest, and there are numerous ones that are out here. So we shouldn't just assume that market means that, this is something that is unattainable. It is not. So I just want to be real clear about that. There's existing demand, for share loans. People need, associations need them, for market rate co-ops that are developed are affordable, market rate co-ops that are affordable. And I think if this product is offered more broadly, there'll be no question about demand. I think part of it is that right now, the way housing co-ops are treated, by realtors and folks, that the information isn't even there. People don't even know that this is, there's an option to secure this kind of financing and all. And so I think that is a really critical point that we need to address. So that's my comment on this.
Just as a transition to Peter, who I believe is next, let me just, one of the many things I've learned from people with more experience than myself is that no one makes money on co-ops. Not realtors, right? The whole system, not brokers, not for-profit developers. These are at cost, right? With your reserves set up as you would responsibly with a, a rental building. Right. And I think that's why it's been so difficult in Chicago, right? Because we're a town where real estate just eats you alive here. So Peter, you were next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think part of the problem with share loans in the market, in terms of for-profit lenders, is they're too small. At least for the affordable co-ops, whether they're market rate or limited equity, if you've got a small loan, that's not a profitable loan for Chase Manhattan or Citi.
Yeah.
And that's where, if we can get the credit unions to really be able to do it, they're more set up for it. And we've been talking to Inclusive, the National Association of the Community Development Credit Unions, and they're really interested in pushing a national system for a secondary market and training for credit unions. So hopefully Chicago will be early in that, but that's certainly a very logical way to do them. And that's for affordable co-ops, you don't want huge, you don't want to do share loans as a major part of the financing, because that is qualified by an individual's finances. And part of the beauty of the housing co-op model is that the bulk of it is a blanket mortgage, not qualified by the individual's credit, which is part of how we can serve lower income folks. But that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That's awesome. I'm not sure, Cam or James, who was next.
I'll make a quick comment. I know we probably have to move on for timing, but I wanted to throw out one other piece of the financing stack that we might want to consider. I don't know if anyone else has mentioned this, but in an affordable housing, a lot of affordable housing developments, the traditional rental affordable housing developments, in addition to the development subsidies, there's also operating subsidy, right? To reach lower those levels of affordability. I don't know, a lot of people don't realize that in a lot of low-income housing tax credit deals, in order to reach below 60%, 50%, 30% AMI, on top of the tax credit and other local and state subsidy, a lot of folks are using vouchers. Otherwise, they might even be rent burdened, even despite being in ostensibly affordable housing. I have not seen a ton of resources or attention put to this issue around co-ops. And I've seen some folks raise this as they think about development models that are trying to reach lower income levels. How can we also think about operating subsidy or operating support for some of these lower income households within the co-op model? There's no reason that programs that subsidize the difference between market and affordable rents for private landlords couldn't also work for subsidizing the difference between an affordable co-op operating cost and what the co-op needs to make their monthly expenses. If we can subsidize landlords to do it, why can't we provide some of those same resources to co-ops? So I'd love to see some thinking and resources put to that and figure out models that could work for that, whether it's HUD vouchers or the local housing trust funds. The money's out there. Thanks.
Thanks, James.
I'll shake my money tree. How about that, James? If only we had one, right?
Let's do it.
And on that topic, and then I'll wrap it up because I know we want to move on. But Linda, I would love to understand better when you said that there's a market possibly in existing co-ops. If you mean for the share loan, if you mean just when they turn, or would people that are currently in there actually kind of almost like not refinance, but like come out with get a loan and then pull that into the co-op? Like, how does that work in existing?
Talking about people new shareholders that are coming into existing co-ops.
Yep. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So when people will need to sell their shares or whatever, then the ability to bring them in
Yep.
with a share loan to pay the share price. That's what it is. It's about the transfer price. Yes.
Got it. And then all I'll say on this topic is that if there's a market here, and we hope and believe there is, it has to revolve. The funding has to revolve because there isn't a money tree. And so I'm looking into right now. I'm looking into Freddie, like securitization, basically the secondary market. And and if there was a way that we could actually, Freddie Mac will buy share loans as long as they conform to their underwriting standards. And I'm digging into what that looks like right now. But pots of money to get something up and running are excellent and serve a purpose, but they're limited. And so in order for this to really have legs, it needs to have a secondary market, which, just so folks know, I'm really looking into what that would look like.
That's great.
But I'll leave it there.
Oh, I'm so glad you're doing that. Yay,
NCB's product, I thought that's an FHA secondary market. I'm pretty sure, isn't it? NCB share loan. I think it is. So yeah, I think that is a secondary market.
They'd have to be selling it. Like, I don't know NCB if they're securitizing it in a Freddie Mac seller.
I think they're selling it. They're selling it. I think they are selling it. And the only other thing I can say about that, they had a much greater presence here when they actually had a person on the ground here many, many years ago. NCB. So yeah, that made a big difference.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. A terrific conversation. I appreciate all the comments in the chat and the dialogue there. I hope we can copy all those so we don't lose them. I mean, one of the things we wanted to do, I think James and others, Cammie, yourself, and asking, if we build it where they come, the rest of the meeting, we kind of wanted to explore and drill down a little bit around the consumer side. Who are they? How are we going to attract them? Where are they coming from? Just piggybacking on that kind of framework James mentioned earlier, is there something available for, just trust funds? How do we get those operating subsidies to enhance the viability and interest of folks in this market that we believe has momentum and should be growing to help really impact the incredible affordability crisis that's here and across the country. But let's talk a little bit about that on the individual resident and who will be interested, and how do we make sure there is a pipeline. Can we talk then about, for instance, is there picking up the notion of subsidy incentives? Can we do anything with CHA selection programs, for instance?
Well, they have that $25,000, home buyer subsidy. I don't know what and I think it always depends on what the deal is and whether or not, they can bring in something that would restrict them on their share. But there's that $25,000 assistance that buyers across the city can get.
Yeah, that's fairly new, correct? They just announced it last year?
Yeah, like 2 months ago. Sorry, it looks like Peter had a comment.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead, please.
Just in terms of the ongoing subsidies, a standard federal rental voucher can be used with a co-op. It's a rental owned by the residents, and so from a federal standpoint, that qualifies. We use them routinely in New York. Of course, it's up to the local jurisdiction to allocate them that way, but there's certainly no federal prohibition on them being used that way. They don't have to be home ownership vouchers. They just a standard rental voucher. The other huge subsidy that for operations is tax abatement. That if tax abatement was available, that that's a huge ongoing subsidy. And I don't know Illinois' policy on tax abatement for housing co-ops, but it's, yeah, it would be, yeah, pretty normal if they weren't giving them, but totally appropriate if they were.
Thank you, Peter. James, I see your comment, and McGriffin in your